Welcome to week 6 of K&A Bible. We are, after this episode, halfway done with the K&A Bible series. This week, we are covering chapters 10, 11, and 12, which sounds like a lot, but I promise you, it's really not. Like, Caden and I were going over this, and I honestly think that this might be one of our shortest K&A Bibles, if we can focus up and get through it.
Very unlikely.
Unlikely to happen. Welcome to week 6. So, Caden, starting us off with chapter 10, what goes on here?
All right, so in chapter 10, we hear about Peter and Cornelius. Cornelius is a centurion.
You nailed it. You would not believe the amount of takes that it took for us to get that clip right there.
Cornelius is a centurion, meaning that he has like 100 men under him. So he has a decent amount of power. I mean, he's a pretty important guy. And he gets a vision one day to bring Peter to him. So he goes and he has some of his men go out and get Peter. Well, in the meantime, Peter also has a vision, and in this vision, he sees like animals in his vision, and the Lord is saying like, "Hey, eat these animals, or like have these animals." And he's like, "Oh, I could never. These are like unclean and all that." But the Lord is like, "No, these are clean. I'm giving them to you. Eat, like have these animals." And that is, lo and behold, how bacon became a thing. Trust. And then he also had a vision that wasn't about animals and food. He also was told, look, there's some men who are coming to get you, to take you to Cornelius's place. And so he's like, okay, like I'll go. So he goes to Cornelius's. They're all there. And Cornelius has some very wise words when they get there. He says, look, I had a vision to bring you to me. So I had some guys go out and get you to bring you to me. They did bring you to me. And now you're here talking to me. So that's ultimately exactly how the conversation went when you got there.
Like if you don't believe us, literally just look at Acts chapter 10, verse 30 and on. Like it literally says, "And Cornelius said, 4 days ago, about this hour, I was praying in my house at the 9th hour. And behold, a man stood before me in bright clothing and said, Cornelius, your prayer has been heard. Your alms have been remembered before God. Send therefore to Joppa and ask for Simon, who is called Peter. He is lodging in the house of Simon, a tanner by the sea. So I sent for you at once, and you have been kind enough to come. Now therefore we are all in the presence of God. Hear all that you have been commanded by the Lord." Literally says, I had a vision you'd be here. Now you're here. Welcome here. That's wise words from Cornelius there.
Yep.
So then, after this interaction, we see why God gave the vision to Cornelius for Peter to come to him. And it's so that way Peter can preach the good news to all of the Gentiles who haven't yet heard the good news of Christ, who haven't heard the gospel. So Peter's speaking to all of these Gentiles in the area. And as he's speaking to them, the Holy Spirit descends on them. And there's a whole bunch of them that come to Christ, as is the story of Acts. Chapter 11, this is where things get absolutely wild. And by that I mean Peter goes back to the church and he tells them literally chapter 10. If you want to know the first part of chapter 11, go back about 1 minute and listen to what we just said about chapter 10. That is exactly what Peter says to the church. So
Debbie, you can just edit this by replaying exactly what we had just said. So
exactly.
Exactly what we had just said. So
exactly.
And then in chapter 12, Herod.
King Herod.
Sorry, Herod was being violent towards the church, and he actually killed James and then put Peter in prison. And Peter was set to be killed the next day, like 24 hours later, like tomorrow. But Peter was ultimately rescued.
Yeah, so Peter's chained up in the prison, got his chains on him, and there's guards on either side of him, so that he ain't going nowhere. But then, as tends to happen when the nighttime comes, the guards fell asleep. And
that's what happens at night.
Yeah, it does. And then an angel showed up and was like, Ayo Peter, want to come out here? And so the chains fell off Peter's hands, and he stood up, and the angel said, put your cloak on so no one sees you, and let's get out of here. And then they just walked. They just walked out of the jail, and the gates of the city opened, and they left. Then Peter shows up at Mary, the mother of John's house, and he knocks on the door because he wants, somewhere to stay for the night now. And a servant girl named Rhoda goes to answer, but she's like, well, clearly this isn't Peter because Peter's locked up all the way over there and he's probably dead. So this is actually just the ghost of Peter. And Peter's like, that's a great theory, except not that thing. I am here, and let me tell you what just happened. So he tells her about how the angel rescued him, and then, they rejoice because Peter's been rescued.
Mm-hmm. And then the next little section, Herod, there we go. Herod is giving a little speech, and the people there are like, oh, these are like super good, like wise words. This couldn't be from a man. This is from a god. And Herod's like, oh yeah, like, yeah, maybe I'm a god. And then God, like real God, is like, oh no. So he smites him down. He's dead. To which Herod is then eaten by worms. His remains are eaten by worms, which is just the ultimate little like troll, like haha loser. Like, how you gonna eat by a little worm? It's like that big. But like, so that's pretty much how chapter 12 ends.
Yeah. And
then we go into chapter 13 next week.
Yeah. So those are chapters 10, 11, and 12. We're halfway done with K&A Bible. And like I promised you, even though it's 3 chapters, it really didn't take that long. So I hope you enjoyed, and we will now let Butch cook.